Hi, my name is Jessica Lilly, and I am a watercolor artist based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And I have something fun to share with you today. Uh, I like to participate in watercolor competitions and art shows. And recently, one of my botanical paintings, Sage Wisdom Rose, for myself and my older self, was selected as a recipient for the M. Graham Paint Award. And I thought it would be really fun to look at the paints with you. Got a whole set of M. Graham paints. I got 18 colors, plus I bought myself one more color that I can't live without. And I've been playing with it lately and making work that are exclusively out of that M. Graham palette, so I can really get a feel for how those paints work together and how I can use them and best apply them. And I'm about to get started on a new painting, and so I thought it would be a good time to pause and do a color chart of the whole set. And I thought maybe I would take you along so you could see all the colors and see the whole palette. And also because if you're someone who takes classes with me locally, this is what I do when I get new paints, especially if I'm going to buy like a new whole set and they're all the same brand. Um, there's some benefit there because they are made similarly and they're made to work together. So a lot of times I mix up different brands and use different brands together. But I've been working just with this one set intact lately. And this will show you, like, this is how I examine it, and this is how I get to know it when I'm first meeting it. So come on, let's chart it out and let's look and see what colors we've got. So let's look and see what tools I have to do this color chart today. I have a piece of watercolor paper that was kind of just scrap paper. I keep down here in my desk. I keep a stack, a collection of leftover pieces from full sheets that I tear down from. I find that most often I work with full sheets, and so whenever I have scraps and stuff, I keep all my scraps. I do paper swatches on all these little end pieces that are left over. And this was a full, not a, this was a larger sized piece of paper that I had that was in that. On the back, there's some old erased sketching, and so I thought this was a great opportunity to make the front swatches. This is good quality, 100% cotton watercolor paper. I don't know exactly which one it is because I pulled it out of there, but it's either going to be an Arches, Fabriano Artistico, or it's not going to be anything else. Those are the two papers that this could possibly be. So it's one of those two things. I've got a large bowl of water so that you can see when I am painting, I paint with a big bowl of water so that I can continually have clean water, and I do refill it fairly often. Today I'm going to work with my large plate as a palette, a space to mix out my paints. And that's so that I have a lot of space to mix stuff up. That's pretty much what this experiment today is going to be. How do these paints all swatch out and how do they mix together? I might do half layer and half mixed. So we can see what glazing kind of tends to happen and what mixing kind of tends to happen. I've gone ahead and poured all of my colors out into pans. And so that's what I've got here. And I'll show you how I have those labeled in just a minute. But the first thing I'm actually going to do to get started is I'm going to measure this out so that I have a grid to accommodate all of my colors. I've got a total of 19 colors. I got 18 for free as a gift, as an award for placing in the watercolor show. And I bought one more because I depend on Nicolazo yellow, and most of the yellows in this kit were fairly opaque, and I really do feel like I need a transparent yellow to be able to make glowing yellows. So so I bought myself a Nicolazo yellow to fill my set out and to round it out, and it really is a very complete set with that addition. So I'm really excited to see what blends I get. Partly the reason I'm doing this right now is because I just finished a large 20 by 30 painting called This Is a Lot, Stormy Azaleas, of dark pink and dark red big azaleas. And I did that painting with this set of paints. And so for that, I used exclusively the quinacridone violet, quinacridone rose, permanent alizarin crimson, and Payne's gray for the whole painting, except for I had some small areas where there were some greens and some yellows, and so I used the azo yellow and the cadmium yellow mixed with Payne's gray for any greens, and some spots had some yellows, but it was very minimal. And so that inspired me. I want to use it again, and this time I'm going to paint some lily pads and some lotus. This is the source for the next painting that I'm working on here. And I'll show you that drawing maybe here before we sign off so you can see where I'm headed with this. You can see where I wanted to have those transparent yellows. I really want those transparent glowing yellows in here. I think that's going to make a huge difference. And then having the combination of transparent and opaque yellows in this flower, I think is also going to be important. So I want to work with those together, but like, which do I use, right? I've got three choices of opaque yellows. I've got azo yellow, cadmium yellow, and gamboge. And so this chart's going to help me kind of see how do things mix together and help me make the decisions that I'm going to want to make to move forward into that painting with a new paint set that I don't know as well. So give me just a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grid this out. So how I'm going to do it is I'm going to start by measuring it each way, and I'm going to measure what the interior space of my paper is. I'm going to divide that by 19, and I'm going to make 19 spaces each way. So they're ultimately going to be little tiny rectangles of pigment. It's not going to be a very big area, but that's what we want is a penciled out grid. And I also want to make sure I leave some space on either end for labeling. I want to give myself some space to label, so I think I might mark an inch off of each edge. And that's going to be where my label is. And so after that line, next is where I will start my measuring divided by 19. So I've got an inch on each side, and that's going to be where the titles of my paints are going to go. I'm just using a level F pencil today. That's a little bit softer than I sometimes use for my drawings, but it's going to write a little bit more fluidly and a little bit easier than the 2H's, which is just going to be a little bit more of a joy for me to work with writing down all the names of everything. And I'm probably going to do my labeling in pencil as well. And I want to be able to write on my chart the name of each pigment so I know what I've got. And then from here to here, what I'll probably do realistically is count the small lines and divide those by 19 and then mark it all out. But give me just a minute and I will return back to you once this is all charted out. And hopefully you can see my pencil lines. Once this is all charted out and I have my lines ready, and we'll get started looking at our colors. Okay, here we are. We have a chart laid out with 19 squares going in either direction, one for each tube of paint. And what we're going to do is we're going to label them now, and that's also going to have me run through the names of all the paints with you. I might just show you how I'm going to label them and then turn off the thing. I'm going to label them with their full name on this longer edge here. And then this is also a label edge, but I'm just going to write the initials down here because there's not as much space. And then we'll start painting them in and we'll see. Something that I do want to encourage you to do when you do this is to put them in a color that will be pretty for you, because it'll look like a rainbow when they're all together. And so I have my pans here laid out in warm to cool. And now's a good time to consider if we want to make any shifts or any changes to that. we probably should start it here with purple, and we'll go purple back to yellow, connect the yellow to the green, and then go through green, phthalo green, and then back through all these back to Payne's gray. And it's important to think about that now because I want to make sure I write the name of my colors in the right order on my chart. So I'm using my same pencil here, and I'm going to write the names of these in pencil. You could always write this in pen if you wanted to, so that it's permanent. A habit that I like to do just in general when I'm using a pencil and I'm going to be rubbing my hand across my page is I put an upside down page off to the side. And that's to protect my paper from getting smudges everywhere because I don't want this to get all smudged up. So I'm going to do the first one here with you, and then I'll probably pause the video, finish out the chart, and then we'll get started painting in. So this one's Dioxazine Purple. So I'll just label it Dioxazine Purple. And then down here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to write Dioxazine Purple, so I know it's the same color. And then I'm not actually using my tubes to do these swatches. I'm going to use these pans. So I'm just going to push this out of the way off to the side on my piece of pottery here, so I know which ones are done, and move into the next color. Now, one thing to note is I probably will just remember what all these colors are and won't have to pick it up. But if these pigments are new to you and you need to reference what they are, I also labeled my pans. I know that I didn't spell gram right, but I wrote it in my own shorthand so that I would be able to reference and recognize later what it is. So I write the name on one side. This is M grams Dioxazine Purple, and that way later I have Dioxazine Purple in at least 2 other brands, and so this way I'll know later when if I decide to let the separating the M gram kit out from the rest of my pigments go, I will know that this is the M gram one. Although I might also know because the M gram paints stay sticky when they dry, and all of my other paints that I have dry when they dry. So that's something that's been interesting. And I have been really happy with the saturation of these and the vibrancy of these so far. So and the color that's retained after they dry too. So I'm excited to swatch these all out and see what mixes we get, really, when we mix these warms and cools together, because I really do want to see what blends are going to happen. So I'm excited. So let me label the rest of these out, and then we'll do it. Okay, so let's get started. I have a brush that will fit precisely into the size space of hole that I have, and so that's going to make my life easier doing this. I'm going to get a paper towel off to the side so I can control my water. I have one of my favorite brushes, which is my Silver White Bright 10. Silver White Bright 10. And my size of my bristles is almost the exact right size to just make a tiny little line inside of each square. And so before we get started, I want to think a little bit about, or as we get started, I want to think a little bit about, like, what are we looking for, right? Like, why do this? One is I want to just see what my colors look like, so I have a good reference point and a good swatch for how these colors are going to paint out. So I want to try and be consistent with how much pigment and how much water I'm using at any given point. So this is Dioxazine Purple and Dioxazine Purple, so I'm just going straight Dioxazine Purple here. But my next spot is going to be Dioxazine Purple and Quinacridone Violet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to put out onto my plate 19 little spots. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, picking up some extra pigment off of any of these because it doesn't need to be a very big spot and I don't need a ton of paint. 12, 13. I do want to try to be consistent. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. All right, so I've got 19 speckles of deoxazine violet, and what I'm going to do is I'll have this off to the side, so now you know what I am working with, and I'll try to keep twisting that as we go. So I'm going to paint down my row and do my whole row, and then I'm going to give myself a marker where I can see the halfway point, and I'm only going to do everything above my row. What's going to happen is the down this line here, this is going to be quin violet, so this is going to be a straight quin violet. There's going to be a diagonal line down the middle that's going to be straight color, and to do on top and below the line will be duplicates. So I want to do mixes on one side and glazing on the other side. So I'll go ahead and do this whole row of deoxazine purple with mixes. But then after that, I'm going to go straight down and I'm going to mark my diagonal out so I can see where my split is, my midpoint split. And then I'm only going to do glazes. I'm only going to do mixes above and I'm going to do glazes below. And that's going to help me plan that out. All right, so my next color is going to be quinacridone violet. So I'm going to get just the smidgeliest bit of this because I just have a tiny dollop of paint here, right? All right, so I want it to be like a 50-50 split. I want to know what these two paints look like mixed together, deoxazine purple and quinacridone violet. And I am going horizontal in the row for these. All right, the next color I want to mix in is going to be permanent alizarin crimson. And these should just be like in order, right? I should follow the same order that and if it's not, if I didn't, if it's not a good mix, like it also depends on which color is stronger. So if it's not a good mix, I'm going to pull some more pigment. I'm going to drop permanent alizarin crimson in. My next one is quinacridone rose. Kind of a lighter version of it. I want to make sure I have enough saturation to get a good representation of that pigment color. It's a little tedious and a little time consuming to make these charts, but I find that they really help me when I'm looking to pick a palette, right? They really help me, like, how can I get the kind of transparent orange that I'm looking for? This will show me the subtleties of what these colors mix together like. So next is going to be Pyrrole Red, which is this beautiful cherry red color. This is a color that was new to me with this palette, and I am just blown away by how stunning it is. And this is one of the colors that inspired me to want to make this chart, because mixed with the, what I have found was that mixed with the dark blues, the turquoise and the phthalo blue that came with this set, it makes a gorgeous dark. And I'm into that. It's really pretty. And you can see I'm using my hands to remind myself of where I am so I can see. I'm not going over anything twice. I'm just going over it once, so I really have a good read on what it's like. Next one is Azo Orange. Going for a tiny bit. A little more. More purple in here. That's a pretty neutral brown color. Gamboge, which is this warm, orangey-ish yellow color. My experience with this color in the past has been with new Gamboge. So straight Gamboge is kind of a new color for me. I have a neutral mix of the two. Ready? Cadmium yellow is next. This is a really opaque, I'm going to pull a little pile for myself of my purple off to the side so I don't have to pull from there every time. Just keep it up here so I can pull from there when I need a little more purple. It's a pretty gray. It's a very opaque yellow, which I find is one of the reasons why people a lot of times talk about yellow being so difficult to paint with. Watercolor paints come in varying transparencies and varying opacities, and cadmium yellow is really opaque. This is a plain azo yellow. And I have luck using a combination of transparent and opaque yellow based on my goals and what I want to happen. We're in the yellow territory, so we're getting a lot of like neutral browns because those colors work to neutralize each other in that way. All right, now we're going to this is the color that I added on. This is nickel azo yellow. This is a highly transparent yellow. And so that's why I added this in, because I really do feel like I need this really transparent yellow to be able to thrive in my glowing yellows. All right, next is permanent green pale. Let's see what that does. Ready? Phthalo green. Expect that this should have a capacity to make a really beautiful dark with adequate paint saturation levels. Phthalos make such pretty mixing colors. That's really pretty. Cobalts are also really beautiful mixing colors. So next up is cobalt teal. I see that when I use my water, it shakes the table. So I'm going to move my water off this table over here so it doesn't shake the table. That's better. All right, so let's pull a little bit of cobalt teal. And a little more. It's one of the benefits of using cobalts, I find, is that they're just a really beautiful mixers. That's a really pretty color. All right, we got turquoise next. Beautiful warm blue is the combination of those two. But staining and non-granulating. That's, I think this turquoise color is staining and non-granulating. The next one is phthalo blue, which is another staining and non-granulating color. Very strong pigment color. This is a good way to warm up this purple as well. Get a warm staining blue. It's really pretty. Okay, cobalt blue's next. Next is the mix with ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue is really pretty. I haven't had a chance to actually paint anything with it yet, but sure is pretty. Okay, burnt sienna is next. A little bit more of this purple I have on the side. Pretty. And the last one is Payne's Gray. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this up close so you can see how these blends came together up close. And then I'm going to do the diagonal thing that I'm telling you about so you can see the separation. And then I'll probably do the rest of the chart off camera and then pull back in together with you in just a few minutes. Well, for you, just a few seconds. For me, this might take me an hour and a half or something, but it's worth it for me because I want to have a reference on these paints. And also, it's not just for the sake of the chart, it's also like the sake of making the blends. And the process of making the chart teaches me a lot about how do these pigments mix together and what kind of colors do they make. So let's look at these mixes that we just made in two places, because as I go along doing this, I'm going to be examining them on my palette here on my plate. And I'm learning a lot about my colors as I'm mixing them up on my palette. So we started and we went around the circle this way. And we can start to see too if some of them are separating and granulating. Like here, we've got a lot of separation and granulation. This is a beautiful separation. That's got to be yeah, that's a cobalt teal. This is phthalo green. No. This is pale green light. Permanent pale green. This is phthalo blue, and then this is the cobalt teal. And so I don't know if you can see that split. It's beautiful the way the colors divide. And so there's some really beautiful things happening that I can learn about. And so I want to pay attention to that as I go and just kind of study it and just learn it too. To be able to see colors split like that on my chart, we would really want to like pop some extra water back into it. So our chart won't really show us that much. But let's look a little bit at our chart so we can see. There we go. This lined up here so we can see what some of these colors were like. Pretty, huh? So this is straight deoxazine purple mixed with quinacridone violet, permanent alizarin crimson, quinacridone rose. The next category is with pyrrole red, azo orange, gamboge, cadmium yellow. Gamboge and cadmium yellow both gave me a very similar neutral kind of a brown color. Azo yellow is this one, and nickel azo yellow is this, a little bit muddier yellow. It's going to be the more transparent one though. Permanent green pale, phthalo green, cobalt teal, made a beautiful lilac color, turquoise, phthalo blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and Payne's Gray. So I'm going to do the diagonal line. I'm going to clean my plate. So I'm going to clean my plate between each one so I can have a clean, fresh palette. And I'm going to do my diagonal line all the way down, and then I'm going to do mixes only for everything above the diagonal line. And I'm going to work on doing glazes for everything below the diagonal line. So down underneath the diagonal line here, for example, on deoxazine purple, well, I'll show you what I'm going to do when we get back. I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so next we have a color that they are calling phthalocyanine green, which my brain interprets to mean phthalo green. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I guess that means. So we'll pull a small amount of phthalo green here, enough to get a good sample. Make sure we end up in the right spot. Dun, dun, dun. Drop a little bit of pigment there. Water this down a little bit more so we have a nice pale version to layer with. And we'll go down and do the rest of our column in phthalo green for our glazing column. All right, next one is going to be cobalt teal. Got some dirty, I'm being careful to clean off if there's like a dirty speckle from when I was doing a swatch before. I really want this to be an opportunity to use fresh, crisp, clean colors. I really want to be able to see the color in its purest form, so I don't want to have dirty colors when I mix them. All right, I've got cobalt teal. And then we're going to add some more water. And this is just looks like it's a very heavily granulating color. I can just see it on my palette as I go into it. Really pretty color too. Got a painting I'm going to do soon with my mother-in-law, and this is the color of her jewelry. So I'm glad for this color. I have cobalt teal in 2 different brands. I also have coarse cobalt teal. So that's cool to compare. Now turquoise is a color, I don't have any other colors called just turquoise. I have ultramarine turquoise, which is really heavily granulating. I have that in core. I have aqua green in Winsor and Newton, which is kind of similar. I have, but nothing that's this same exact kind of color. So this is a new color for me. Turquoise. Let's get a little bit more saturation in our more saturated one so that we have a good representation of this color. And then we'll do a watered down version for our glazes. When we do our glazes, we want to make sure that all these are 100% dried, but they will be because we're going to go do the mixes, everything on top first. All right, phthalocyanine blue, which again, I just assume that it means phthalo blue. Phthalo blues are usually pretty intense, so you shouldn't need too much pigment to get a nice strong color. But I find that with these M-gram colors, they're all kind of intense, and they all require only a little bit of pigment to get a nice, good color base. All right. Nice pale watery version. All right, next one is cobalt blue. These 2 colors, when applied, tend to be, what I've noticed is in this palette, they're very similar as far as like their chroma is concerned. Cobalt blue and ultramarine blue. Here's cobalt blue at a more saturated density. Let's water that down. Ultramarine blue is going to be next. A little more towards the purpley blue. Pretty, I feel like the ultramarine blue is really beautiful in M-gram. It's really pretty. All right, and some glaze layers. All right, we've got burnt sienna next. And that was a big pile of it. I want to make sure that it's a similar consistency to everything else that I've been using. So I want them to have a similar density, like a paint to water ratio, so that all right, now you know what we can do is we can leave these out to start with our glazes. We can let this dry and come back in and glaze. So especially over, rather than have to waste any extra paint. Right, and Payne's Gray is just going to be straight Payne's Gray. Okay, pressing on. I'm going to let this dry, I think, and then glaze these colors that are currently, glaze all these colors that are currently on my palette, which is about half of the palette. It's all the cools plus the burnt sienna. I'm going to let these dry completely. Then I'm going to glaze these back on top, and I'll pick up with you when I'm ready to start glazing so you can see. But I'm going to wait for this to dry first. Okay, so we're going to start here with the closest to the top of my chart, the first one we did, which is the um, permanent green pale, this guy here. And we're going to want a similarly, I'm going to add a little bit more water in here. As they dry, they compact in their pigment and they become more pigment dense. So we want a similarly transparent paint. We want it to have similar amount of water in it so that when we glaze over, I'm going to move this up out of my way so I can get a good angle on this, so that when we glaze over, we can see the other color through, because we want to see what do these two colors look like glazed together. So I'm going to do glazing over the row of permanent green pale. And rather than go side to side, I'm going to go up to down. And I'm just going to go straight across this row with a thin little layer so I can see what do these colors look glazed on top of each other. Make sure that I have enough pigment down that I can really get a read on that and really see what they look like. And I'm remembering that I'm not just doing this for the sake of looking at it later. This process of me doing it now is a big part of what I learn about this when I do this. So cool. So that's going to give me a ton of information to see what these different colors look like. And let me show you up close so you can kind of see a little bit too what some of these are starting to look like. Let's do the phthalo green next. Looks like it's pretty watery over here already. So, all right, phthalo green. Try not to touch the two colors together or they will mix, the two wet colors together, or they will mix, and then you'll have a slightly less true representation of your colors. Cool. And that gives us a bright array of, especially with this the phthalo green is such a beautiful bright color, and we can see the difference in like bright leaf greens. What are some different iterations that we can get out of those mixes? And here's the two ranges between mixing together the permanent green pale versus the phthalo green in these beautiful bright leaf kind of colors. This also shows us some purple that we get when we mix these together versus brown when we mix these together, and some really pretty blues when we mix those together over here. All right, let's look at cobalt teal next. It's pretty because the cobalt teal is a little bit of a granulating and separating color, and it draws some separation on top. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so here we are. We have all the glazes done underneath that diagonal, and so that shows us all the range of colors that we can get from this set in glazing. And the next investigation that I have is, what about mixes? That's my real biggest question that I have. Is about mixes. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do a couple of rows here, and then I'll finish it up off camera, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so we already did mixes with dioxazine purple. We're going to do quinacridone violet next. So I no longer have 19. I have 17 squares left. So I need 17 dots of paint. One, and let's make sure that we make enough that we can make a nice hearty mix this time. Let's be a little less skimpy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. 17 little speckles of paint. And we're going to go in one by one and mix that with our colors. So first up, it's going to be with the next color down the road, which is Permanent Alizarin Crimson. So mix the two of those together, see what we get. Permanent Alizarin Crimson plus Quinacridone Violet is pretty because Quinacridone Violet has this beautiful blue undertone. All right, that goes here. Make sure I don't put these guys in the wrong spot. So it gives us a Permanent Alizarin Crimson with a little bit of a blue undertone, which is really pretty. Next is Quinacridone Rose. That's pretty too. Quinacridone Violet is a color I don't use that often. It's a color that's kind of hard for me to use because of that blue undertone. And so seeing it in context like this, like mixed with these other colors, is actually a really beautiful way to look at it and to examine it, to think of it in these other contexts. Make sure I don't have any more paint on my brush than I have in my little pile. But this is one of those mixes that's just so stunning and so magical to see it come together because of that blue undertone. And so it's giving all these colors a permanent blue undertone. That was Pyrrole Scarlet. Next one is Azo Orange. Gamboge is next. You know, in an ideal world, we want like a 50-50 mix, but nothing's perfect. So, such a cool color. I don't know when I would use it, but it's got like it's got just a really cool well, not transparent because that was a gamboge is a little bit more opaque looking, but it's just got this like multi-dimensionality with the way that the colors kind of are separating and the way that it's got those two colors lined together, which is just really pretty. Next up is Cadmium Yellow. Azo Yellow is next. Next is Nickel Azo Yellow. Which I'm hoping and expecting will blend in general just a little bit more transparently than some of the other colors. And that's certainly the case here. You can see that a lot here. This is a staining transparent color, much more than that. And that's something that I'm always looking for in my yellows as a mixing color. And you can really see the difference here as well. That's something that I'm really looking for in my yellows, is opaque and transparent yellows, but I need that transparent yellow. We're moving into Permanent Green Pale. Green apple-y kind of color. Pretty. And you can see I start to mix them and then I back off a little bit when I start to see it's at like a 50% saturation. I really want to get like a half and half split. So if my quinacridone violet is stronger than my other color. I pull off of it. Phthalo green is next. These should be a pretty mix. Let's see, I'm curious. Nice, rich. This is like Mayan blue and Daniel Smith. That's a pretty color. That's a pretty color for deep water, and it's something I'm thinking about right now for my next painting is deep watercolors. How can I best get my deep watercolors that I'm looking for? All right, cobalt teal is our next mix in. Slowly just picking up a little bit of pigment so I get a similar amount here. A little bit heavier on the cobalt than the let it be. It's a pretty, it's got a pretty undertone. It brings that really pretty undertone, which is really cool. Turquoise is next. The turquoise is a strong color comparatively. It really took center stage, so that's just good to know. Phthalo blue, let's compare that. Phthalo blues in general are strong, so let's get a little bit more curious to get a better representation of this one and this one. Let's see what happens if I mix in a little bit more. I went back a step, right? While it's still wet, and I'll drop this on top. Give myself a little bit of a that was turquoise. Phthalo blue is the next one, and I just dropped a bunch more violet in there so I could get a better mix because it's going to give me this deep, rich, dark blue. So pretty. That's gorgeous. This is definitely where this shines, is mixing with blues. I guess because of that blue undertone. Those are just really gorgeous. All right, where are we? Cobalt blue. That was something I noticed in general when I was making a comparison between should I make a go for this next painting and try to use my M-gram set or my mixture of other paints that I have. And one of the things that compelled me to go for the M-gram was that that turquoise color was really making some really beautiful darks in a way that was really compelling for me. And also the way that the Pyrrole red was floating on top of that was making a gorgeous dark, which I just fell in love with. And so that made me realize that what I really wanted to do was explore all these colors more so that I really felt more clear about how they work with each other. Ultramarine blue is next. Ready? Red sienna. It's not as similarly better. And the last one is going to be Payne's Gray. Now, unlike a neutral tint, Payne's Grays normally have a bit of a blue undertone, which you can kind of see here a little bit. A neutral tint would just darken a color, but Payne's Gray is going to not be as neutral. Although in M-gram, I would say that this is so far looking more neutral than like a Winsor & Newton's Payne's Gray, which definitely is more of a splitting blue undertone. still in the dark neutral range. And again, now that we're doing blends, let's look at our palette and look at what happened after some of these had a chance to rest, and we got some really pretty color shifts. Again, that's just gorgeous. It's the violet and the phthalo blue. It's the cobalt teal over here. It's really pretty too. Oh, pretty. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the rest of my mixes, and I'll catch back up with you in a few minutes when the chart's completed. Okay, one big beautiful color grid later, it's all finished. I'll document this and put this on my social media if you want to see it, so you can see it up close and see all these colors. But let's bring it up close to the camera for now, so that we can get a chance to really see these blends. So they go the same direction, right? So this is the dioxazine purple, and down here it goes dioxazine purple. So I'm going to read the colors that are mixed in across the in this order. So it's dioxazine purple, quinacridone violet, permanent alizarin crimson, quinacridone rose, pyrrole red, gamboge, cadmium yellow, azo yellow, nickel azo yellow, pale, permanent green pale, phthalo green, cobalt teal, turquoise, phthalo blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and Payne's gray. And here's all the different blends and all the mixes that we have collected. Level that out so you can see it really clearly. There. Hold it like this for a few seconds so you can get a chance to really see some of those blends. The greens, I think, were the biggest surprise to me. The collection of all those beautiful, bright, vibrant greens are just gorgeous. So beautiful. The cobalt blue plus burnt sienna, it makes the softest and most beautiful pale gray, which was just gorgeous. Cobalt teal made a soft one too. The ultramarine also made a beautiful neutral gray, but the burnt sienna and cobalt blue gray looks like a sweater. It's gorgeous. That's this gray right here, which is just so beautiful. Some of these dark neutrals were really lovely. I'm really in love with this Pyrrole red. The more I use it and the more I see it, these dark blends are just beautiful. That's with phthalo blue. That's such a vibrant, warm plum color. This is Pyrrole red mixed with turquoise, and that's a dark, deep, rich shadow color. And this is phthalo green mixed with Pyrrole red. Again, just so beautiful. I'm probably going to be using the Pyrrole red mixed with the turquoise and the phthalo blue for the shadows in the water for my next painting I'm looking at doing. This didn't change my mind at all from the colors that I was planning or thinking about doing for my next painting. It's great. It'll be a great reference for me to have just moving down the road as I spend more time getting to know this palette and spend more time getting to know the M. Graham paints. And I'm so happy to have these, and I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful to have these in my collection and to get to play with them and to enjoy them. And this is just such a fun way, such a relaxing way to get to know my paints and to see what can I do with them. All right, later next time. Have a nice week.